from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased joining me from the US, Raj Singh. Raj is the VP of Product at Mozilla, but in a way, as the audience know by now, I like to give it to my guests to give us a little bit about, the background, their journey, and what you're currently up to. So, Raj, thank you again for being here with me today. The floor is yours.
Sure. I'm Raj, VP of Product at Mozilla. My journey, I'll try to keep it to a minute. It's been a series of startups beginning with dropping out of master's effectively in 2000, or not finishing at least, pursued my first company. Never really looked back. I've had multiple startups since then. What I would say is half of them failed and half of them did. Some did well and some did mediocre. Landed at Mozilla through an acquisition of my last company that was focused on meeting summarization. This is kind of like pre-ChatGPT era. I know it's a very hot topic. And now my focus is on new products at Mozilla. So I've been working on a variety of products in and related to small business. So whether it's setting up your website, invoicing, accounting, growth, all the sorts of different facets that are involved there. Everyone wants to be their own boss, ownership economy. So it's kind of a, the freelance economy, et cetera. So it's the fastest growing business, at least in the US, the side hustle. And so we're trying to help enable and support that. Otherwise, interests span, product management, GenAI. I've been at that intersection for a while, but yeah, that's kind of my quick 2 cents about me.
Great. And thank you again, Raj. And what a fantastic journey. I would say we have a lot to learn from you today. So starting, a little bit from what you mentioned about starting and exiting. So you've built multiple startups, mobile browsers to recipe communities to calendars. What's your personal pattern recognition when something is working? Because you said like some stuff worked, some stuff didn't work. What do you think, today in this Gen AI era also as well, some of the things that we need to focus as, of course, entrepreneurs who want to start something, how we can measure what is working really?
Yeah. So in my opinion, companies follow S curves. And if you kind of think of an S, it kind of goes like that. And within what they don't really think about is within that S curve, there's like thousands of little S curves, right? And so sometimes you hear terms like product market fit, have achieved hit a certain LTV or hit a certain ARR or whatever. But the reality is, like, you're going through another form of PMF, every 3 months, every 6 months. It's a different set of issues, right? And so at the very beginning, at least for me, thematically, I tend to focus, and again, this is me, and different entrepreneurs, resonate differently and do it differently. For me, I focus on personal pain points. So I've always been in the bucket of, is this something I'm experiencing that I want to fix for myself? How can I resolve this for myself? And if there's me, then there's maybe 10 of me. I know a lot of people caution against that sort of advice, but most everything I've done has been consumer, and thus why, if you look at my background, it spans ringtones and music to live video, to recipes, to calendar. These were all various pain points. Each have their own sort of story arc in each of their own sort of times. How did I know if things were working? You don't. This is like the hardest question. What I tell most founders is, there's like a few percent of startup, maybe let's say like less than 5%. They're just rocket ships. Like if you get on one of those trains, like you're lucky you got there, and just hang on. Like you're growing no matter what. You joined a PM early in Google or Facebook or whatever. It didn't matter what you did. You could be the worst performing PM. The company was still growing gangbusters. And so just amazing to me. Right. And then there's like 10, 20% of startups that really are just totally failing. Like it's very clear from from the outside, and honestly should shut down. It's a difficult situation or has to, the founders have to have the perseverance to say, I want to pivot this or move in a different direction, whatever it is. But the vast majority of startups are somewhere in between. And it's super hard because there's no clear signal saying this is working. Maybe you have figured out like, okay, I have a certain NPS score, and we're acquiring a certain amount organically, and our blended CAC has come down, quarter over quarter, and we're retaining and whatever it is, who knows? We're generating a certain amount of revenue or a certain amount of engagement or session time, but like you just don't know. Everything is sort of arbitrary in some way. And then you hit the next issue, like, well, can I make this repeatable? Can I scale this? Can I go faster? As it become linear growth? Because in startup land, linear growth is effectively failure. So, uh, you know, uh, as I said, the vast majority of startups are in this bucket, and I didn't know in each of my times, right? And if you look at why a lot of these startups ultimately fail, um, I don't think it's necessarily they didn't crack that code. Maybe they got to a point they're at 2 million ARR or 3 million ARR. That's great, but they're like stuck in this purgatory. It's because the founders get tired, right? Like you're doing this for 5 years, you're grinding. I mean, you may not be at work all the time, but you're thinking about work all the time. And that really, uh, I think that's really the number one reason, outside of just simply running out of money.
Right. Now, I'm gonna ask you something which is related to AI because we're gonna talk a little bit about AI here today. And you mentioned you've built like AI products before, ChatGPT was something, and it was so cool. What have changed, do you think, and do you think, easier now for building product from scratch, leveraging the different AI tools, whether, from ideation to validation to even writing, the code for the MVP or vibe coding? How have you seen this? Is it like getting easy? Is it getting, I mean, of course it's getting easy, but is it like more challenging from differentiating yourself in the marketplace because it's available for everyone?
I think things have rapidly changed. My first attempt at some AI stuff was like, I think 2004 or 2005. I was building a desktop app to do photo classification by face, because I had all these photos I was collecting, and I was like, hey, it'd be neat if I could search for just Raj or my brother or my mom or my dog or whatever it is. And uh, I had to use OpenCV, and everything is C++. It was just much harder, right? And you don't have the cloud hasn't really formed, the tools weren't there. Fast forward, I had a company I spun out of Stanford Research Institute called Tempo that was acquired by Salesforce, and we were doing meeting preparation like it was a smart calendar. And in that case, we were doing semantic analysis, and we were doing entity classification or named entity recognition, whatever you want to call it, ranges of things like that, like building sort of an ontology of you and your data, and then we could surface and associate and just show things related to your upcoming meetings. It wasn't machine learning, so to speak. It was a bunch of rules and heuristics. Machine learning was hard. I mean, it was expensive. It was compute expensive. It required multiple cycles of training. It just wasn't there. When I look at like my last startup doing meeting summarization, we were finally there, right? We could train our own model, annotation pipeline. This is pre-LM era, but it was still foreign to a lot of companies, and many companies doing any sort of machine learning were looking at very narrow sort of cases, right? And now fast forward, we have generalized AI, and we have it in the cloud, and it's available through like 2 lines of code. And this has been the most dramatic disruption of productivity I have seen in my career. I mean, certainly the internet and mobile are up there as well, but this is just amazing. And I think, the way I think about it is usually like when there's a new technology. So like back in 2008, I remember on the App Store, there was a location category, and these were apps that used location. And it was just kind of silly if you think about it, because like what app doesn't benefit from location? And so we kind of see how we went from location as a category to location as a layer. And the same thing is true now with AI. If you look at pre-Gen AI era, there was actually a category like in a market map that maybe an investor would put together. So these are AI companies. But now it's like, what company isn't using Gen AI at some point in their workflow? It's almost silly to say, oh, this is an AI company, unless you're doing just deep research. Um, and so the fact that we're now at this point, and we have fractional experts, which is basically Gen AI at our fingertips, I think you're seeing rapid uh, rise in what I call vibe creation, whether it's programming or whether it's like writing or content creation or video or an architectural diagram or an interior designer, and it's really unlocking the massive creative energy across all of us. And so therefore you're just having much more creation, which kind of points at what you talked about with the signal, the noise, and just the volume of things being created. But I just think this is just this is, people talk about Neuralink. I think of
Hmm.
this as Neuralink. It's Neuralink without needing to put something in your head, right? Like you're getting the Neuralink but in software.
That's interesting point of view, Raj. Now, beside designing the product, like coding and so on, how are you seeing also the AI impact on something like what we call growth hacking and user acquisition? Uh, like, do you see it like overused? Do you think like there is still room for improvement on it, or we can say, because I'm seeing a lot of people talking about now relying on AI in some startups completely to have this, I would say, engine for customer acquisition, while some people they are saying no, it's so early, we can't 100% rely on AI, so let's slow down things, let's keep doing it to the way we were doing before. What are you seeing from what you are
Yeah,
going to say
so
today?
I would say sort of many points. I think certainly the role of the people's roles are changing, right? If you think of let's take an engineer because it's just kind of an easy example. Historically, you're writing code, you're testing code locally or whatnot, you're reviewing code, and you're merging code and resolving conflicts, and you might be writing some technical specs and things like that. But that was loose, that was kind of, and obviously communication and whatnot. But that was kind of your broad sort of role. Their day to day is shifting now to not necessarily writing the code, but writing the instructions to generate the code, and then reviewing the code that AI is generating to then catch errors or mistakes to write better instructions the next time around. They're still involved in obviously creating the initial architecture, but then AI is generating the scaffolding. They're still involved in writing maybe like the requirements, how to approach this, but then AI is then filling in those gaps or thinking about those edge cases. And so this is a dramatic shift in how people work. And this is happening everywhere. You could think of, let's say, just a writer. Maybe historically they write all of their own articles, but it's not uncommon now to sort of verbalize all your thoughts, maybe to an AI. Say, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. I want to make this point. Here's some interesting quotes, blah, 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 whatnot. And then AI writes the first draft, and then you review and edit and improve upon that. And then AI may say, oh, no, that's good. And then you can ask AI to simulate how people would respond to this. And then you make further edits and then you submit and publish. And that's a dramatic shift in the workflow. And so I think we're seeing this across all sort of occupations, and so I sort of feel uh, this is reinventing everyone's sort of work. And to your comment, like what am I seeing at least with Gen AI in terms of growth, in terms of other sorts of functions? Well, now that we've democratized access or given everyone access to these fractional experts and unlocked all this sort of creative energy, you're seeing all kinds of things being created. And, from a growth perspective specifically, this is a category that's always been very heavy AI. If you think about where AI was probably used the most historically from a tech perspective was ad serving and the ad ecosystem, right? So they're always been playing with A/B testing and how to improve different sort of outcomes. But I can speak to at Mozilla, we've looked at or we've built, vibe coded tools to help with, for example, making it easier to publish a corporate blog. So if you need to publish a bunch of posts, because we shouldn't have to human author all of those things, and any of these companies, anyways, were outsourcing these to basically human writing farms, so they're pretty much already low quality content. But like we've kind of reinvented that workflow. We we looked at what now people call AI SDR, like cold email drip campaigns. Like, how do you generate the
Mhm.
first email? If you have a lead, how do you send it? How do you follow up? How do you personalize it? These are things that you could rapidly vibe code and get like 80% of away there. I don't see the human in the loop going away, right? I have this sort of rule with AI. I think I call it the 95% rule, which may or may not be accurate, but the general contention is that AI is 95% accurate. It's good to use as a litmus test. Maybe it's 98, maybe whatever. But given that it's, let's say, 95%, how does that affect how you approach the problem, or how do you approach the user experience? A good example is if you're thinking you're going to rely on AI to schedule all your meetings, but it gets it wrong like 5% of the time, that would be unacceptable, right? And the same thing is true, for example, with the self-driving car. Like if it drives, but 5% of the time it makes a mistake, that's unacceptable, right? So there's certain applications and workflows where you need 100%. And so in that case, how do you bring a human in the loop so the AI is doing more of an assistive role, or maybe doing the foundational work, or whatever it might be, right? So it's just a different way of thinking about how you approach problems and where the human might play.
Cool. Now, speaking about, this shift also, Raj, because you mentioned about you developing tools that helps freelancers, solopreneurs. Um, I've seen, AI is allowing everyone to kind of building their own businesses much easier than before. Now, the question is, if we have this community of builders, let's call them this way, or like solopreneurs, um, so are we going to have really what a lot of leaders in the AI, like Sam Altman mentioned it, and some other people, like about the unicorn, one person company.
Yeah.
Is this something which feasible in the near future? I mean, maybe in 1 year time, or is it like kind of a long vision that we still need to develop a lot of other AI tools or leverage what we have done so far to make sure that we can have the full-fledged, AI powered company, whether it's agentic AI or maybe some other new concepts that allows really one person to run the full thing by themselves. So how far, like my question is, how far still we are from really having, these massive businesses run by one single
So
person?
when I hear those comments, I think of it as a very aspirational kind of goal.
Yeah.
Can one person build $1 billion company? Um, and I think it's fine to think like that in tech. Being working in tech and being in the tech community, we like to think in hyperbolic ways, like, oh, we can get to a point where we can replace everything. We can automate everything. We can automate,
Right.
the HVAC repair, which I assure you is not happening anytime soon. Uh, so, um, uh, no, I don't expect, multiple $1 billion 10-person company. However, the friction that's involved to get there has come down substantially. No different to the laptop, no different to the internet, no different to mobile, which is amazing. No different to the cloud, enabling it, making it easier to build. Um, and then two, having fractional experts at your fingertips means the friction to get started, way easier, right? And you can automate some of those functions. But are you going to entirely rely on your chat GPT attorney to draft all your legal documents? No, you're going to certainly use it for perspective. You're going to get a first form or a first draft or whatever, but you're still going to go and speak to a real expert, because there's a number of things that need to happen and assurances you need where you just simply can't be wrong, right? You can't be wrong with 5%. And then on top of that, there's still all this other stuff that just has to be done, whether it's operations work. Sure, you can automate some of your customer support. Sometimes then you get on the phone and your voice bot isn't going to do well enough, or maybe there's sales and you have your AI sales chatbot that's sort of answering questions, but then they want to talk to somebody physically, or like whatever it is, right? Now, do you need as many people as you may have needed before, because some of the operations can now be done by others? Probably not. But at the same time, what are you going to do with that extra revenue that you're now making? You're just going to go faster. You're going to build more. It's not like you're going to stop, right? I think the fundamental issue is just we're all thinking too small. We're thinking like $1 billion companies when you start needing to think about trillion as the new baseline. And we start thinking about trillion as the new baseline, then you're like, well, we're just going to need 10 times more people, right? Even with the AI, right? So, my general opinion is capital creation and just productivity is just going to go off the charts. We're sort of seeing 10x's across individual contributor functions in organizations everywhere. Certainly different flows are getting assisted or augmented with agentic internal tools or whatever it might be. But that doesn't mean the companies are going to do less. No, the companies are going to do more. They have product roadmaps to take over the world. Now, that certainly means that, signal noise, who do you trust? It becomes a more competitive environment, but all those things are still going to matter. But I think this is like single-handedly probably the best time in my career to build.
Absolutely, it's the best time to build. Going back to what you're currently doing at Mozilla, Raj. So you're leading what's called the 0 to 1 initiatives, right? And usually when we hear the term 0 to 1, of course, startups comes to mind. Now, how, as a product leader, do you approach this 0 to 1 in a very well-established legacy company like Mozilla? Like, how you can apply what you've done in different startups back in the days into that setup. And I'm asking this because, one of the things that happen usually is a lot of startups, they get acquired, right? So by bigger players. And I've read like some stories where this 0 to 1 concept can be applied easily in bigger setups. So, what can you tell us about what you're currently doing, how you are doing it at Mozilla?
So I'll share what I can, and I'll also
Sure.
add, 0 to 1 has many meanings. Like new product
Right.
development differs from company to company. I'll start with a macro statement. In general, large companies suck at building new products. Um, and I don't say that from experience, meaning I'm not worked at very many large companies. I say that from anecdotal data that I've gathered in talking with a number of companies that have various sort of 0 to 1 or new product sort of initiatives. And the question is why, right? Like you take like a labs group in a Fortune 500 company, and like why isn't it working? And the real trick here is figuring out, one, can you create the necessary changes that are needed to sort of address those whys? And I'll go through those whys. Um, and is there enough conviction and team and culture and board that's on board to do that for a long enough period, right? So let's go through some of the reasons. So like one, a lot of a lot of new product development means you need a team that's comfortable in ambiguous amounts of data, right? If you think about different archetypes of roles that people hire within an organization, a lot of mature companies hire operators, people who know how to extract another 1%, run an A/B test, get another 0.2% here. Um, Decisions are data driven. In many cases, they're more consensus driven because they're driven off data. When you're dealing at 0 to 1, you don't have data, right? And so you have to sort of make decisions because you have strong conviction and you don't have consensus. You have 10 different opinions around the room and people like, I disagree or whatever. And you have to be able to kind of plow through that, which is really, really hard and very atypical for folks who primarily work in operator, product management, or other kinds of roles. Right. And one of the reasons it's so hard is it feels uncomfortable because you now actually are accountable to a decision without data with people with different opinions. And then what if it fails? Right. So which kind of leads to my second comment is failure. Like failure is not when dealing with mature products, there's so many strategies to deflect failure, right? So it's like, well, the data suggested that we should do this, or we used a series of outside consultants and they recommended we do this. When you're dealing with new products, like you're pretty much accountable to your decisions and your failure, and you have to be totally comfortable with that. And most people are not comfortable with failing because the way the incentive structures are created in large companies, it's they almost mask this, right? Because it's about like being on the hot product and growing at the right time and all these sorts of things. And so you don't want like you never really experienced this. And this is something that's very different in startups because you're failing publicly all the time. And so a lot of people are just not comfortable in that kind of role. And this kind of leads to, an orthogonal topic, which is just the entire career level guides and how you think about that with new products and 0 to 1 development totally different, right? All right, so let's go to like number 3. When you think about mature products, the people you hire tend to be very specialized. You might have an SEO team, you might have a go-to-market team, you might have a product marketing team, you might have a market research team, you have your PM, you have your program management team, you might have engineering, you have testing, whatnot. All of those sorts of functions are kind of rolled into just a single PM in the new products team, which is much more of a generalist. It's more of like, I have a breadth of experience across a range of things. I'm a super curious person, so I can learn and figure it out when I need to go super deep. But at the same time, like, I'm not like the top 1% expert on anything, but I can certainly learn faster than most people, and I can do that. And that's very different to the types of folks that are often hired within more mature products. Typically, they're hiring people who've done the same thing for many, many years, right? Maybe they've been a senior leadership, product management leader, whatnot, for many, many years. And so they're really good at organizational design, right? And that's kind of their expertise. Or maybe they've been working in a particular domain for a very long time, and so they want them in that very specific domain. And so those sort of things go sort of out the bucket, right? So these first 3 things I just talked about are all related to talent, right? So then you have organizational things, right? So like number 4 here, um, legal, administration, and not administration, administrative,
Mm-hmm.
finance, all that sort of stuff. Those things can massively detriment new product. When you think about new product and startups, we have to operate in gray areas. There's not a startup in the valley that didn't at some point do things that were slightly questionable, like whether that's cold email marketing, whether that's some tactics that may be a little bit frowned upon, but these were necessary to drive growth. And then once they achieve that certain growth, obviously, they change and they become, you know, uh, let's say more comfortable or whatever you want to call it. But until you get there, it is a lot of hacking. It is a lot of sort of gray area decisions. There is a lot of like little tactics around your drip email or whatever it is. Who knows, right? And when you have a mature company, it's very hard to sort of deal with this, right? You have legal saying, no, you can't do that, and legal creating roadblocks. And so, my sort of fourth point here is, and again, not all companies can do this, but can you adequately create some kind of firewall where your teams can go use whatever tools they want without having to go through legal review? Because they just need to move fast and try a lot of things. Your teams can expense whatever they want because they need to try and test things and that's not typically how things work when you deal with mature products. They run through processes and they have to get reviewed and they have to go through security reviews and all these sorts of things. And your teams, if they need, to do things that are a little bit more gray, that's fine. But maybe like we figure out a way to shelter the brand, right? And the way legal and terms of services and privacy policies and all those things are created are much more form and more generalized as opposed to narrow, right? So that's kind of like the sort of fourth bucket. The fifth thing, which I think is part of the reason that a lot of these new products fail within many organizations, is what I call the conviction window, right? And so you typically you'll have some leader, and they support these sort of initiatives, and then there's turnover in leadership or organizational design, and you lose your kind of sponsor, right? And you're no longer the shiny object. They've moved on because startups and building new products just take a long time. The average time to liquidity in the valley for a venture backed, like a seed stage startup, is at least 7 years, right? So like not a lot of people are on for that ride. And if you look at a lot of these great growth stories, like, oh, look at them and look at that, they were like grinding for 5 years. I mean, here's Lovable hitting, or Bolt, or one of them hitting like 100 million ARR, but there was like 5 or 7 years before that where it was like a zero, right? Where they're just like trying to figure this out and then they pivoted. Look at Slack, look, so many of these success stories went through such long grinds, and many large companies don't have that kind of patience because they're so focused on immediate dollars that this conviction window is short. And so there's some tactics on how to work around that. And I think the sort of the sixth thing, in a lot of companies, building new product, build it as an adjacency. So you're basically saying, here's my core product. I can message this audience. I can upsell to that audience, and that's perfectly fine. But for some companies, these are truly new products. It's new go-to-market. It's new audience, and a lot of companies don't know how to deal with that. Right? They have a marketing team or a product team that's always had users, and now they have to start with zero. And like, how do we acquire new users, and how do we think about new audience and all that? So, these are ranges of things. I probably could speak on this topic for another 30 or 45 minutes, but there's a lot of reasons why new product development is so hard in large companies. Now, I've been fortunate. I've worked in multiple incubators and accelerators. I'm running this, least for small business within Mozilla itself, and I've had multiple startups, and so I've got this kind of rounded perspective. I feel like um, uh, I can see where things are breaking down, but I think for many leaders that try to enter this, they come in fresh, and they're smart people. But the thing is, they try to operate like it is their, even when they're trying to be intentional about it, because they just haven't really seen how scrappy the other side is. Like we haven't even talked about incentive structures, right? How do you do payouts? How do you do promotions? It's totally different. It shouldn't match the guides on the other side of the company, right? So various reasons. This is kind of the quick, the quick 2 cents.
Absolutely, it's make a lot of sense, Raj, to me, and I think we discussed it with multiple guests on the podcast. Usually, I tell people to understand why big companies they don't usually I'm saying innovate. So there's a great book called The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. So it's a good book that gives people understanding why this happens. And the author gave some tips, let's say, like even if you are like a well-established company, how you can try to create new markets, or like let's say try new ideas, which is a great book. But to your point, this is the true story of every startup and how it can become in the future. You mentioned something about pivoting, which is I tell people, pivoting is one of the sometimes it's a destiny. It depends, of course, on market conditions, depends on the idea they are building. But people, majority of them, they say we are afraid of pivoting, like because we don't know if we should wait a little bit more or like we should really go and pivot. What do you think, a main kind of, I would say, it's multiple things, multiple points. I know, like, but what the major points that they need to consider as signals that need to push them to iterate on the product or maybe even on the whole business?
I think the answer to this question depends also on the stage of the company. Like if you're a startup and you're pre-PMF and you're pre-revenue, right? The sort of penalty or sunk cost or whatever you want to call it for pivoting is substantially less than your company making, 2 billion a year, mature 1,000 people or 5,000 people or whatever it is. And now, it's a much bigger ship to steer, right? It's not a motorboat, it's an aircraft carrier, and it's hard to churn if you get more people aligned. I think the other thing to call out here, people think of pivots, they think of product pivots, but pivoting doesn't just mean product. You might pivot your
Mm-hmm.
go-to-market. You might pivot your target audience. You might pivot your business model, right? There's many forms of pivoting. So I think it's, in many cases you built the right thing, but for the wrong user, or you built the right thing, but you're not the wrong model. You're not charging enough and you can make more money, right? And Google didn't know, that ads was the model, right? They probably maybe initially thought maybe it'd be, we charge for it in some way. I mean, I don't know, right? Or it'd be sold to companies or something, who knows? Right. So, um, I think, um, I think now the core of the question is when's the right time to pivot? Now you hear a lot of stories about startups where founders spend too long maybe on an idea, and you're like, man, they should have pivoted sooner, or maybe they're pivoting too much, and then they run out of money, and now they've exasperated their team. Each pivot is not only physically, it's not only physically exhausting because you got to kind of run through it, but it's emotionally exhausting, right? And that exasperation can really hit teams. And so I think. I think the way to think about this, and what I often tell people is I used to have strong opinions here, like when's the right
Mm-hmm.
time or wrong time to pivot. Now I ultimately say it's really up to you. You got to obviously look at all these sort of different considerations. And the reason I say that is I've come to realize that I've seen every scenario at this point work. Like I've seen people do something. I'm like, man, they should pivot. They go 7 years, then suddenly it starts working. They cracked it. The market shifted or whatever, right? I've seen examples where people are pivoting every month. Classic YC example companies. And then like suddenly they found something 2 years later, which is insane to me too, right? So I've come to the point now where I'm like, I don't know anymore when's the right or wrong time to pivot. I certainly have my own rubrics where I think about like, this doesn't feel right. A lot of it's gut call. It's not something AI is going to answer for me. But I think the key is being as informed as possible and making sure you have as much data as possible and making sure you've done enough repetitions So you can kind of see it, right? Because at the end of the day, uh, pattern matching is a big part of this game, but I would also say there's plenty of anti-patterns that turned out to be crazy success stories.
Yeah, to your point, like sometimes we call it the gut feeling slash the data. So it's a tough decision, but yeah, like I think it's becoming more and more complex, or let's say critical moment that the founder or the founders they need to think about. Now, shifting gear a little bit, Raj, and you have raised before capital um, for your startups, and usually it was considered kind of a like minus point, I would say, if you are a solo founder or solopreneur, whatever you want to call it, especially in early stage product. So, have you seen this? You know, kind of becoming more acceptable? Is there any changes, especially with the AI wave that started it, like with the Chat GPT and all the other tools, that now VCs are accepting more and more the idea of solo founders building great products?
I so I don't have the data. So I don't know um, if the number of solo founders raising venture money has gone up or down. What I will say is VCs have always invested in solo founders, but it was less common, but not for the reason people think. It was less common because statistically, solo founder companies did worse. Why? Because founders get tired. And founders, being a founder is probably one of the most lonely jobs you can imagine. And the reason is nobody is totally honest, right? You have your board and you need to obviously you want to authentically share your information, but you're certainly spinning it in a certain direction to exude a certain amount of confidence, to show that you have an idea of where we're going to go, and what we need to do. And there's a strategy and not all is lost, right? You have your team, uh, that some members of your team can handle the emotional swings of startups where you have like super high days and super low days, but most people can't. They're not built in that way, right? And it's not and just to be clear, when I say not built that way, I don't mean that as a negative. It's just, we're different archetypes, we're different personalities, we have different strengths, right? And so some people don't do well with like large swings, and that's just not the way they work. And so you need to shelter that information, right? And so when you have your all hands on a Friday or a team gathering or whatever it is, you have to, present in a certain way. And so you're authentic, but you're spinning in a certain way, right? When you're talking, when you're at that CEO dinner that your law firm is putting on or your bank is putting on, right? And you're talking with other founders, you don't want to be totally honest. I mean, there's a risk that, information spreads and it affects your future fundraising, right? This stuff happens all the time, right? So you have to like spin it in a certain way. Like, yeah, things are going fine, we're growing and we're trying to solve this. And sometimes you might be a little bit vulnerable, but it's guarded, right? And so you start going through this and you're like, wow, like who can you even have your own family? It's like, hey, Raj, you're like always working or thinking about work. You're like never like focused on me. I could tell you're thinking about something else. And like, well, no, things are going fine. Like who can you actually be totally vulnerable with, right? And so uh, the challenge is the job itself is so difficult and so lonely. And founders is very different to a hired CEO, just to be clear. I mean, hired CEO is a stressful job, but hired
Right.
CEO doesn't have the same gravitas because in many ways, hired CEO can blame the company if it doesn't work out. But a founder gets all the, if it succeeds, everyone takes credit. But if it fails, they blame him or her. Right. And so uh, I think given all that, uh, you know, I'm just trying to, I like lost track of the original question here, but I think this, the solo founder, yeah, and I think that is why you see a bias towards investing in group founders and so much of venture. They are looking at data and statistics, but again, as I mentioned, a couple earlier in the call, earlier in the podcast, uh, plenty of anti patterns that buck that trend, right? So nobody
Right.
knows.
Yeah, so I think what I've been noticing, it's completely fine being solo founder as long as you surround yourself with people who can help you in the things that you can't keep doing it by yourself, the things that you can't scale, right? So being able to delegate some of the stuff, like you don't need to go and do every single thing by yourself, even maybe they are not co-founders but kind of supporters, let's call them this way, that they can do the, let's say, the nitty gritty things, right? So you don't need to go yourself and do everything
Yeah.
from building the product, sales, marketing, everything, unless maybe it's something which is maybe it's a kind of a uh, product led kind of product that, yeah, people can go download, or it has network effect, yeah, people gonna go and discover and so on. But yeah, to your point, I think this is also what I'm seeing, and I'm sure because I follow the VC landscape both in the US and in the MENA region where I am based, so seeing the same pattern over there. Now, going back to having kind of this your expectation, or let's say vision to the future, where do you think there's still a bunch of opportunities in consumer AI beyond just like productivity and creativity tools? Like what what are still some of opportunities over there?
In consumer AI,
Yeah,
you know, I think I would answer that differently.
sure.
So and the reason I say that is I think the minute you inject AI into that question, you're kind of putting the tech before the problem. I think consumers don't care whether you use AI or not, right? They're just a
Mm-hmm.
core set of problems. Like, can you solve this problem for consumer? And when I think about very successful consumer products, they usually tap into a consumer vice. And so think of like Maslow's, hierarchy. Think about your core needs, right? And it is wild, right? How many consumer products are really focused on really only addressing 4 or 5 things, does it help me? Does it make me rich? Um, does it um, does it help me meet my partner, my future girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, right? Does it uh, um, does it solve boredom? Like, does it entertain me? Right, right. So like if you start looking at it from that perspective, like where you kind of break it down, like all consumer products have to kind of map into one of these buckets, right? Then uh, then everything becomes more clear. And then the question is like, okay, well, whatever I'm building, can it benefit from using AI or not? Right? It doesn't have to use AI, right? So let's take the FANG company, take Facebook. It's an entertainment company, right?
Right.
Like I'm bored, right? It helps me connect with people, see what's going on, right? Like it's an entertainment company. LinkedIn, like it helps me get a job. It makes me rich, right? It's like, does it make me safe? Right? Like, I mean, these are which is really driven off fear, right? And so you start mapping back to these core vices, Netflix, entertainment, right? Like consumer products always fall into these buckets. Uh, at least when you're talking about the unicorns, right? And so when I see a new consumer product and I can't quickly map it into like some kind of core consumer psychology need, right? Then I start asking the questions like, okay, how are we going to drive growth? Right? Because word of mouth becomes a lot harder because there
Mm-hmm.
isn't this sort of motivation to go and then just install and like activate and try this app out, right? But if you really want to tap into like high motivation, then you have to play on one of these core needs.
Absolutely, make completely sense. And to your point, like I like when you said you don't need to tell people that it's AI. Like you need to just be solving a problem or like adding some value to them without mentioning the AI. So I love this because people, I think they are doing this mistake. I see it more in B2B, in the consumer space where, hey, like we have this AI powered XYZ. And I tell people why you feel the urgency to mention the AI if it's not needed. And they said, yeah, it's just the hype. So we're not, we just need to follow the hype. But I think it's also apply in the B2B because at the end of the day, what they look at is, are you solving a real pain for them? What value are you adding? Maybe you can go into the AI piece later on. But in my opinion, it's not necessarily to mention it unless, uh, there is a, I would say, very kind of need to mention it. But anyway, Yeah, you want to say something, Raj?
I was just gonna say, yeah, I don't think of when I hear technologies like cloud, AI, mobile, whatever it might be, like to me, those are just enablers, but they're not really when
Right.
you find a problem you want to fix or address and build a product around it, then you ask the question like, what's the fastest way to build it? What's the best way to build it? How do you create a delightful experience? How do you create an experience that's sticky? How do you lock in data? All that kind of stuff, right? And then if you need to use those different technologies to make that happen, that's great, right?
Right.
I think there is a lot of this sort of what I call putting the carriage in front of the horse, like tech looking for a problem, which
Right.
is a super common early stage founder trap. You get enamored with the shiny new. It happens in large companies too, right? They're like, oh,
Absolutely.
look at this Gen AI thing. Like our product needs Gen AI. I'm like, does it? Like, what is the problem you want to solve? Okay, and can Gen AI do it? Is really the reframing of the thinking that needs to happen.
Absolutely. And all the the studies and I would say the surveys that are being done today. So customers are looking, they know that actually these technologies kind of being commoditized. So it became a commodity. So AI is becoming a commodity. Cloud became a commodity. It's like that there's no edge in the sense of business edge. Yeah, it's a great technology. But yeah, so everyone is using the cloud to your point. Everyone gonna be using the AI. So again, great insight here. Now, Raj, as we are almost coming close to the end, um, I'm gonna ask it in a different way. So, if you want to advise someone who is planning to launch a project this weekend, what do you tell them?
I would probably launch, meaning starting from scratch.
Yeah,
I think I would ask them like, what are their goals? Like, I think that's the first question here. Like, is your goal here just to learn a new technology? People are always playing stuff over the weekend for fun because they're curious. They want to play with some new cool vibe coding tool or new design tool or whatever, right? And if your goal is just to learn, like, go have fun, whatever. If your goal is to build the thing, right? Like, it's going to be a much longer journey than a weekend. I think you get 80% of the way there, but the 20% takes 80% of the time. But more power to them, right? And I think uh, presumably they're pursuing some sort of passion or some sort of problem they've identified, which is great. They either they're the user or they've identified somebody who really needs this and they want to build it for them. And I think that's awesome. I think that person, whoever that is, who's doing that, is already 99% ahead of most of the people out there. And the reason I say that is most people I meet, they tell me all the time, I have this idea, but then they don't really do the second step. If you actually go and build it, you're already ahead of all of these people, right? Most people never get past the idea stage. So, kudos to them.
absolutely. Yeah. So this the first step is like you to go start executing. Raj, where people can find about the work you're currently doing and where they can, follow you or get in touch with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm pretty active on Twitter. I write about startups VC. It's under Mobile Raj, um, startups VC, product management, etc. LinkedIn, you can find me there. Linktree, if you're interested in my product portfolio, that's also Mobile Raj. And then, Mozilla, obviously, Firefox, great browser. And then one of the products out of my group is Solo, so do check it out if you need a website. So I think any of those places should be great.
Great. So I will make the life easy for the audience. All the links will be in the show notes if they are listening on their favorite podcast app, or if they are watching this on YouTube, it will be in the description. Raj, I can't thank you enough for this amazing discussion with you today. Very eye opening. We discussed a lot of things between AI, growth, ideas, products, VC, and raising as a solo founder and bunch of other stuff. So really, it was an enlightening, episode. I learned a lot myself. So thank you for sharing your time. And this is how usually I end my episodes. This is for the audience. If you just discovered this podcast by chance, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, please give me a favor and share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the people who keep coming again and again, you are one of the loyal fans and audience. Thank you very much for what you're doing for the show this year. I know I'm repeating this at the end of each episode, starting, maybe April this year. But without your support, we couldn't rank in the top 200 Apple Podcast, um, in different countries. So this is happening for the first time. We used to rank in the 1 or 2 countries, but last I checked, we were actually in 8 countries, which is something I never seen before. Thank you very much for your support. This cannot happen without two, I would say. One, you, the audience, and second, including you, Raj, my guest. I'm very grateful for all the support, for all, the time you give me. So thank you very much. And as I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.